my pajamas this morning. It's about 5 o'clock in the morning. I've been up since 1 o'clock trying to finish this new video series. And actually this morning, right now, I'm supposed to be at Denny's eating breakfast, heading on my way out to California and Death Valley, where I was going to meet Jack and his family and Matthew and his family. We were going to spend a week overlanding Death Valley. But because of the world situation, we decided to go ahead and cancel, at least for the time being, that event. Anyway, I decided to create these new videos, and I'm going to do one for each year that have still photos that were basically rejects, or for whatever reason weren't used in the past. And there's a variety of reasons I might not have used a still photo. It might have duplicated something that was in a video that I didn't need it because I had video of it. It may have been a series of still photos, and so this time maybe I decided to go ahead and use a different crop, or a different, a little bit different angle on it. Usually it's a tighter crop. Some of the photos were rejects for maybe good reasons. It might be a little bit out of focus, and so I didn't want to use that photo. So you'll see a little bit of that in there. These are from the, so to speak, cutting room floor. So please keep that in mind as you watch it. And I'm planning to create one of these for each year. And as a matter of fact, if this is well received, I'll probably do one for 2020 once we get out of 2020 and I can put it together. I hope you enjoy these stills. Please do bear in mind, if you want to offer criticism on them, that they are the cutting room floor. And if you turn on your subtitles, there will be a little bit of information in addition to the voiceovers that I have during the videos. And I don't know if you know it or not, on One Amazing Planet, and that wasn't really made for the Overland community, that was just made for anybody who might be wanting to just get a little bit of outdoors experience, so I created that video. There are subtitles. You turn on the subtitles and every photo is identified where that photo was shot. So if you want to know, you think, oh man, that'd really be a cool place to drive to and visit, turn on the subtitles, and there's quite a bit of information there that can help you find those places without too much difficulty. I don't put lat-long coordinates down, but most of the places are easily found anyway. So I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, appreciate any comments that you want to give me. Stay safe out there. Whatever you do, sequestered in your homes, just stay safe, okay?
Historically, the K-Trail was a military trail from Mena, Arkansas into Oklahoma. Today, it connects Mena to Clayton, Oklahoma, although most of the western part is now closed to public use. Anyway, we were headed out there in 2012 and spent our first night camped at Clayton Lake State Park. The next day, we headed out Clayton Road up to McKinley Rocks, where we intended to pick up the trail. But the weather had other ideas. Heavy rains, a flop trailer, a pop tire bead, a flat tire. Fortunately, the pop bead was reseated, and heavy winds would all challenge us over 3 days and 2 nights on this surprisingly pretty route where, when you stop and consider it, you think, this can't possibly be Oklahoma. Jeep had released its Mojave Road Wrangler Special Edition, so I did some research into that road and asked on JK Forum if anyone wished to go with me. Several folks were interested. Meanwhile, Overland Journal published an article about Canyon de Chelly. I had visited before, but had not been permitted to drive my own vehicle into the canyon. So we added that to our trip plans and contacted a guide service. We met Ben, our Navajo guide, at the visitor center. The weather was once again a challenge with very cold temperatures and freezing rain and snow. Sadly, the National Park Service no longer allows privately owned vehicles into the canyon itself at Canyon de Chelly. You must now ride in your Navajo guide's vehicle. After our first night camped at Antelope House Ruins within the park, we planned to camp in the National Forest near the Grand Canyon. But radio reports indicated that I-40 was closed near Flagstaff, so we headed south through both a dust storm down low and a blizzard at the higher elevations that took us to Camp Verde. Once we arrived at Laughlin, Nevada, the weather was spectacularly pleasant for the 3 days and 2 nights that we ventured along the Mojave Road to near Camp Katy, California. Our next adventure would be through the Arkansas Ozarks, from Lake Dardanelle State Park to St. Joe, with the final day's lunch at War Eagle Mill in Rogers. We called this trip the Ozark Overland Trail, although it was actually kind of the high watermark trail. I researched the Ozark Overland Trail before we ran it, and the only thing I came up with was a backpacking trail across the Arkansas Ozarks that shared some Jeep trails. So I figured that was where the name confusion came in. We did not realize that the OOT was a project in development by a group of folks who were keeping it close held. This is not that OOT. Anyway, it isn't even practically called the high water mark. We deviated in a few places here and there. Our challenge was my Garmin Nuvi wouldn't accept the entire route GPX file we had, and the Google Earth map running on James' laptop that did wouldn't provide our GPS location. Therefore, we were constantly comparing different map images as we navigated the route. In the end, we started in the right place and finished in the right place. While there was a flat tire, and I managed to do quite a bit of damage to my Jeep's passenger side when I got too close to a trimmed tree limb that was poking into the trail. Despite that, we had a lot of fun. After the Mojave road trip, I had headed up to Seattle to help my friend Ray install a variety of mods on his Jeep. He was eager for an adventure, so we agreed to check out Toro Leap in the Grand Canyon. On the way out to meet Ray in Canab, Utah, where we'd start, I drove through El Malpais, south of Grants, New Mexico. Once Ray and I were together, the plan was to drive out to Toro Leap, also known as Two Leap. But the weather heading down from the north was looking and being reported as bad. We inquired of a few locals and they described what the road would be like and said we should be fine. There was one low crossing where flash flood might be an issue, and it would be obvious. Just don't do anything risky. So we headed out, keeping a continual eye out toward our rear as we drove the 60-plus miles of dirt to the south. And boy, did it ever rain on us. But not until we had reached our campsite. The next day, driving out, the weather was very pleasant, and there was no real flooding of concern. From there we headed to Sedona by way of Snebley Hill Road, and then the next day we drove Soldier Pass Trail. After departing Sedona, we headed to Tucson, where we would drive the back way up Mount Lemmon. By the time 2012 would come to an end, you guys are probably going to think, wow, that Mark must have been a glutton for punishment with the weather. And this run to the San Bois Mountains near Kinta, Oklahoma would prove no different. It's with a certain ironic humor that we would call this the Kinta Dry Run. That was because it was a search by a few of us to map some interesting routes to explore on a second trip a few weeks later. But heavy rains would challenge us, forcing us to use winches several times, and there was yet another flat tire. Note that although in the past the owner of this property did allow folks to freely use it for camping, the current owners do not. The Kinta Dry Run was over, but before the final trip that one was preparing for, James and I would travel to Big Bend. This was the first time for James and me to meet Matt. Along with Matt's father-in-law Manny, we'd spent 4 days, 3 nights in the national park. The weather was incredibly stormy, yet miraculously, we'd only have a few drops land on us. I mean, we were surrounded by very dark storms on night 2, yet hardly got wet at all. Anyway, it was a great trip out to Ernst Tanaha, then the Chisos Basin, River Road West, Black Gap Road, Mare Skull Mine, and then depart the park. This was before the release of the GM Colorado Canyon, and Manny was one of the engineers on that project, so he'd tease us with a few tidbits about the upcoming release. I remember afterward telling Matt this was the best photography opportunity I'd ever had, and I still think that's true. Remember, these photos were the rejects. Based on what we learned during the Kent to Dry run, we planned Kent to 2. Our goal was to take on all comers from American Outback. So it was announced, and other than James and Adam's wives, we had no additional comers. They probably were thinking about all that foul weather we experienced a couple weeks earlier. But the weather was actually quite nice this time. There were some muddy spots, and so there was some vehicle recovery required. But other than a bent step on James' Defender, we had a great time on some reasonably challenging trails.